You're watching VATV, bringing Brookline home.
Hello, I'm Karma Kitaj, and I'm your host for Alivelihood, New Adventures as We Age. As you might know, if you've been here before, I interview people over age 50 who have started to do some new and exciting things. So today I'm going to introduce you to Marian Knapp, who went back to school and got her PhD when she was almost 70. She finished when she was almost 70, and we're going to find out what she is doing since then. So, welcome, Marian.
Thank you.
And as you told me, you've always worked, but you always wanted to go back and get your PhD, right?
That's correct.
And you decided to do that in your 60s, correct?
I was 64.
Yeah. So what was that experience like for you going back to school in your 60s?
Actually, it was probably, aside from my having children, the best thing that I ever did. It was an extraordinary, wonderful experience.
So
I loved every second of it.
You loved
Except
what?
statistics.
Oh, okay, I can resonate with that. So you said you say you loved every minute of it.
Yes.
You loved just the intellectual stimulation of being back in school.
Well, it was a combination of things. I think it was, first of all, as you mentioned, I had actually always wanted to go back to school to get a doctorate. I had a master's degree in anthropology, and I had, but between moves and children, my hopes to continue on to get a doctorate didn't materialize. And the background is that, as you mentioned also, that I've been a caregiver for many older people who live to be pretty old on both sides of the family, well into their 90s. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I was in my 60s, and I realized that I could live to be into my 90s, and if so, what was I going to do with the next 30 years? Mm-hmm. And so I made a little mental list about some of the things that I might want to do, and the first thing that popped into my head was to go get a PhD. So I applied and was accepted at Antioch University in Keene, New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. They have several graduate campuses around the country, and one of them is in Keene. And I was interested, I actually applied to the environmental studies program there, and even though I was not interested in the natural world, I was interested in the total environment that people live in, particularly older people. Mm-hmm. What's that total picture of what their lives are like? Mm-hmm. So I applied, and I said that's what I wanted to do, and they accepted me. And I figured, well, if they accepted me, then they think that I should be able to do this. Uh-huh. So that it was, first of all, an intellectual challenge, which was actually, a number of people had asked me if it was difficult going back to school, because I hadn't been in school for decades. But in a way, it was easier first of all, I found that I had so much life experience that I could decide what was really important for me to learn and the things that I knew that really wouldn't necessarily benefit me in the future. So I had a better way to judge what I had to put a lot of effort into.
Right, yeah.
And I wasn't trying to impress anybody except me, you know, didn't challenge myself to know that I could do it.
Did you do a lot of independent study?
Yes, I did. The first year of the program is that you have to take assigned courses. There's sort of basic courses that you have to take.
And you have to do that on campus, or is it remote?
The program it's actually designed for not older, but mature people who may have jobs. So most of the work is done on weekends. You have to be on campus for the first year. You have to be on campus for the one weekend a month, and then there's an intensive summer program where you take the equivalent of 4 courses during the summer. So you have to be on campus for certain periods, but the majority of the work you're doing on your own. You're not, you know, you may have to read and write papers and so forth, but most of that work is on your own.
Right. So say more about why you loved it so much.
Well, I loved the challenge. I loved the fact that I was going to do something that I had always wanted to do, and that there was, and this idea that it was still possible, even though I was into my 60s when I started. But one of the most wonderful things about it was that I was in a group, a cohort of people who were all ages. I was clearly the oldest, but there were many, you know, people in their 30s and 40s and some in their 50s. And it didn't matter. What was really wonderful, we just all shared this experience, and your age didn't make any difference whatsoever. And in fact, I became really close friends with 2 of the younger women in the class, and I'm still friends with them. And so, and the other thing was that I was exposed to and learned things that I never knew existed. It just opened my mind in ways that I never expected.
Yeah. Well, and you also probably got a lot of experience in writing.
Well, actually, I had done a little bit of writing before, but that were related to jobs that I had had in the past. But I really didn't realize that I could write until I think it was in my either first semester or second term, when I did an optional essay for one of my classes, and the instructor said that I should submit it to the literary magazine at Antioch, which I did, and it was accepted and it was published. So that was the first time that I knew that I could write in a different kind of way that I hadn't written before.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned that to me, and is that the time when you wrote for the first time from your own personal perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been doing more of that lately.
Well, when I finished my degree, my goal, actually, it's kind of a funny story. On the first weekend that all of my cohort was together, and I started in 2002, we had to go around and say what you were going to do, why you were there, what kind of degree you wanted, what kind of job you might want in the future, what kind of publications you might want to publish in. And everybody went around and said this journal and that journal and, you know, different kinds of jobs. And I said that I wanted to write for the Reader's Digest. Now, and so that's, and everybody laughed, of course. First of all, it's not something that many PhD candidates would say. And that comes
not
back.
An academic.
It's definitely not an academic notion, but in a way, it reflects this notion about what I knew. I knew what was important to me, and what was important to me was not to write for an academic journal that only academics might see. I wanted to write from the perspective of a person who was going through the aging process and reflect my own experience in the hopes that it would reflect other people's experience.
Yeah.
So I still get kidded about this, the Reader's Digest.
That's funny because that was one of the things my parents used to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in college and they would send me
Yes.
these pithy articles
Little
from
pithy
the Reader's
articles,
Digest to
right.
try to
Right.
influence my behavior somehow.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, but I think you are doing
And
much of that
I
now,
am
huh?
doing, I'm not writing for the Reader's Digest. And the other thing I knew, I didn't want to be in an academic environment. Excuse me. I wanted to take what I learned back to my community. So, and that I'm doing that as well. So since I finished my degree, I joined the Newton Council on Aging, and I'm now chair of the Newton Council on Aging.
That's here in
Eastern
Massachusetts.
Eastern Massachusetts. It's a suburb of Boston.
Yeah.
And I write a column for the local newspaper. So there's usually an article about once a month that I publish about all aspects of getting older, including the fact that if you have something you want to do, it's really never too late.
And you've
I can
certainly proven that.
And I write trying to show that I can be an example, not to pat myself on the back, but to show it is possible to do something that you always wanted to do. And it doesn't have to be get a PhD. It can be anything that you would want to do and have been thinking about.
Right, yeah. So let me ask you this, Marian. You know, of course, we still have quite a bit of ageism in our culture, right?
Yes.
And I think there is still a stereotype that as we age, certainly get up into 60s and 70s, that we kind of lose some of our brain power. So what did you find out about your own brain power going back to school in your 60s? Well,
that's a great question, because it's one of my big concerns, ageism. I found I was a much, much better student than I was, and I think partly because I had gained some wisdom, and that in many ways I could integrate information in my head better than I could when I was younger. And in fact, there's research that shows that, yes, you might forget where you put your keys. On the other hand, older brains or more mature brains tend to be able to integrate information and see connections among things that younger brains don't. And one of the people who wrote about this is Gene Cohen, who you may know. And it's a very powerful statement of, he was a psychiatrist.
The mature mind.
The mature mind. And he, you know, from his own experience as a psychiatrist and from the research literature, he made a very clear argument that older brains are maybe different from younger brains, but in some ways they're more efficient. And that's essentially what I'm finding for myself.
Right. So I've had the experience in the last few months of preparing for a trip to Argentina. And I don't like the idea of just being a tourist. You know, I like to use it in some way to, you know, broaden myself or learn something new. So I decided, my husband and I both decided to learn tango, which is a very difficult dance, I've discovered. And also to learn Spanish. And I have not learned a new language since I was in high school. And that was not Spanish, that was French. So I'm in this immersion, you know, Spanish training now. And sometimes I feel as if I can picture those new dendrites forming as I'm, you know, pushing myself into this new learning.
How's it coming, learning those?
I think it's coming pretty well.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm doing 4 hours a week of Spanish lessons, plus listening to CDs, and but it's coming along. I never imagined I would be able to learn a language again.
You can, if you put I've learned if you put your mind to it, you can really do it. You have to be motivated, and there's so much that you can do as you get older. But I did want to just get back to this notion of ageism and stereotyping. Over the last couple of years, I've gone to different places and talked to different groups at assisted living and independent living facilities, senior centers, and I was talking to people about ageism. It was actually at assisted living in Brookline, Massachusetts, and one of the women raised her hand and said she went out to lunch one day with her daughter, and the waitress turned to the daughter and said, "What does she want for lunch?" And she was, I won't say devastated, but very unsettled by that. And she said, "I felt I was invisible." And I actually think that's a little bit of what happens when people get older and they have gray hair, like mine. That somehow there's an assumption that there's no brain behind that gray hair.
That's an amazing story, isn't it?
But it's true. And I've written about that. And it's so subtle. We don't even realize that.
That one wasn't so subtle.
That wasn't so subtle, but it happens all the time. And a lot of people just ignore it. But it's so embedded in our culture. We don't have a way of dealing with old age in a respectful way. I mean, AARP does a great job, but on the street, it's not there.
Yeah, right. And of course, there's so many people who've lost their jobs even and still want to work or have to work. And once they're over 50, it becomes much more difficult.
That's right.
To convince employers that they still can function and can offer something to their organization. So let's go back for a moment to what you were saying about your studies at Antioch. I'm interested in the topic that you chose and what you did with it and what you did for your dissertation.
Okay. Yeah, you had asked me about the, was it a lot of independent study? So the first year you took the regular courses that everybody had to take. The second year you had to do basically a year's worth of independent study. You had to design and carry out your own program. So I did a number of things. I did huge literature searches and read in multiple fields and did annotated bibliographies on multiple aspects of aging. So that was one thing. I interviewed people. I interviewed caregivers. I interviewed older people and wrote that up. And I took a course. There's a course, and it's still going. There's a course that's given, it's a collaborative effort between Harvard Medical School and Simmons College called An Integrated Approach to Managing the Care of the Older Adult. It's a long title. And that course is designed for professionals in training, doctors, social workers, physical therapists, and multiple disciplines to figure out how to work together as a team in managing the care of an older person. And I took that course. I did very well.
And of course you did say that over the years you've cared for many older relatives.
Yes, my mother, who lived to be 95, several aunts of mine who either didn't have children around or had no children. I took care of a bit, an uncle of mine, and a disabled cousin who was my age. They didn't live with me, but I was their.
You played a large role.
I was their healthcare proxy, power of attorney, and so forth for multiple people.
So I know you told me that you recognized how little meshing there is among all different services for older adults.
Right. So it was extremely difficult because each time you would go, like my mother, of course, was the one I had the most intimate caregiving responsibilities for. But if you go to the eye doctor or the hearing specialist or a psychologist or however many different things she needed, they don't talk to each other. It's not that they don't want to, but the system isn't set up to make it easy. So as the caregiver has to be the one to integrate all of that and make decisions based on sometimes conflicting information or advice. And so that's extremely difficult, on top of the fact that you're really worried and concerned about the person that you really care about. And actually that was going through that experience was really one of the reasons why I decided to focus on aging. Because I wasn't sure, when I first started, I wasn't quite sure I wanted to do, but my advisor, my chair of my committee, she said, all you're talking about is aging. She said, I think that's what you should work on. So I did. And so once you finish that year of independent study, then what I had to do, as the other people in my cohort or in the program, you take that experience and then you have to write what was called an integrated essay. It was essentially, in that year of independent study, what did you learn? And how does that move you into the next step about deciding what your dissertation topic should be? So it was a very logical progression, but a lot of it was essentially independent. You had to really figure it out a lot yourself.
And it sounds like your style was well suited to be able to do that effectively.
Exactly. I couldn't have sat in a regular classroom and just,
for years. And then you graduated.
And then I graduated.
Almost age 70, you said.
Right. And you asked also about my dissertation, and I'll come back to the graduation. When I began to do a lot of reading, I began to see that there was a lot written about people getting older in cities, people getting older in rural areas, but almost nothing about getting older in the suburbs. There were pieces of it like housing and transportation, but no perspective about what was it like to get older in a place that was really built for families with young children. And it was kind of amazing to me because half of the people in the United States live in suburbia, including half of the people who are over 65. So it was really kind of a revelation to me to say, well, where is there stuff written about me? Because I live in the suburbs. And not me as an individual, but me as a representative of all of these people. So my dissertation was Aging in Place in Suburbia, was my dissertation. And I did my research in Newton, Mass, where I live. And that's what it was.
And you've taken that forward.
And I've taken that forward. I understand what the issue.
Chair of a committee in your town,
right.
On aging. And you write in a local newspaper.
Right.
So can you just tell me a few things about the topics that you write about?
I write about the decision that a lot of people who own houses face, which is, should I stay in my house or should I move? There's a big push for people to stay in their houses, which I think is okay, but it can also lead to people living in unsafe and isolated conditions. So I write about that. I write about what relationships you may have in your community, in your neighborhood, and how do you continue to feel a part of a neighborhood. Since many suburban neighborhoods, the houses turn over, younger people with children move in, and scattered here and there are older people that find it hard to stay connected. So I write about that. I write about celebrating holidays and what that may mean if you're older and alone. I write about all of the good things and the challenges that we face, and that we have the capacity to make a lot of decisions on our own, and we shouldn't wait for somebody else to tell us that we have to do something. So I'm a big advocate of making decisions and making the changes before somebody has to make that decision for you.
Right. And I know you told me that you get a lot of positive feedback from your
I
articles,
do, and
right?
it's been extremely gratifying. It's my vision of writing for the Reader's Digest, because people say to me, "You're writing what I'm thinking," and I couldn't ask for a better compliment than that. And
That's terrific. And you're pulling some of those articles together in a
I'm
book now,
I'm in the
right?
process of compiling many of those articles, plus others, into a book. And the book is essentially done. I'm in the editing process right now. It's like doing a dissertation all over again.
Yeah.
You know, doing the edits, making sure everything makes sense, hangs together,
Right.
and that the messages are clear about the complexity of our lives.
So when do you expect the book will come out?
Well, I was hoping that it would be out in this December, but I myself made the decision to sell my house and move recently, and so the whole moving process got a little bit in the way. But I moved now, and now I'm back editing. I have an editor, and she's been terrific.
Right, yeah. Do you have a title for the book yet?
I do, but it's a draft title, and I'm not ready to
ready to
reveal
reveal it.
To reveal it, right, right.
Yeah, so do you feel you're going to launch the book maybe in the spring?
Yeah, in the spring. I'm hoping it'll be launched, and I'm hoping to do book signings and a lot of, again, I like to stay local, so I'll start local and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, your life story is inspirational. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in hearing about it.
Well, thank you. I don't know. I mean, people tell me that it's inspirational. To me, it's like, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like this is something I had to do, and I want to tell older people that it's still possible, and you shouldn't give up on something that that you really might want to do. So, if that's inspirational, I don't know, but that's my message.
Yeah, well, I bet that just the fact that you did decide to go back to school in your 60s is something that, you know, that you're a role model for people as they age.
Well, I hope so. And just one thing about when I graduated, my granddaughter, who's now 9.5, she was not quite 5, I think. And she was sitting, it was in a big auditorium, but she was sitting right in the front in the balcony. And when I walked across the stage to get hooded, she yelled, "Yay, Grandma!" And everybody, of course, laughed, and people after said, "Oh, congratulations, Grandma." So it was a very fun and lovely thing. Yep. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being with me today.
You're very welcome.
And I'm looking forward to hearing about when your book comes out.
I will definitely let you know.
Okay, so join me next time when I will have a new guest for you on Alivelihood, New Adventures as We Age.